Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our very first podcast. This is Steve, and with me I have Toby tonight. We're really excited because this is our very first podcast. We haven't even thought of a name yet. Toby, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. So tonight we're going to be talking about our feelings of Breath of the Wild. Uh,
Yeah, what we think about the game, and I guess we both played it. We both really loved it.
yeah, it was really awesome, and I think it really changed the way that I feel about open world games, and also just my feelings of Nintendo in general, especially going forward and kind of like what they intend to do.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the thing is we talked about this game so many times, and we both could probably just gush our feelings about it for 3 hours, which we're not going to do. Which we're not going to do here. But I think the bigger thing is that we both think it changed the gaming industry, the open world industry, Nintendo, the whole series, the whole Zelda series. I think it just did so much for so many different things, and it's truly one of those games that comes out and you just know it's going to be a huge mark in the video game history. It's like one of those games like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VII or Crash Bandicoot. Any of these huge games, I think Breath of the Wild will eventually be up there, ranked with importance for what it does for the video game industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the moment, didn't I read recently that it just broke 10 million units sold, which makes it the highest selling Zelda game ever, right? As far as I know.
Yeah, that happened maybe about 2 weeks ago, and they said outside of HD remakes. I mean, that's a whole different question. Do HD remakes count as a Zelda game?
Okay.
Because then you have Twilight Princess, which was the previous record holder, and Twilight Princess had an HD remake on the Wii U, I believe. Maybe
Hmm.
it was the Wii U. And if you combine the HD remake and the original, it's still outsold Breath of the Wild, but without including HD remakes, Breath of the Wild is currently number one.
Yeah.
So that's a whole question of like semantics, I guess. Like that could go either way. Like
Dude,
what?
isn't it the Wind Waker that was made into an HD remake for the Wii U?
Yeah, but Twilight Princess is the number one seller. I think they'd also had an HD remake on the Wii U.
Oh, okay.
Wait, maybe I'm wrong though.
I think you're wrong.
But Wind Waker definitely hasn't outsold those games.
Yeah, no. Yeah, the it's just interesting, and I feel like it's a huge moment for Nintendo in general, um, to have a just like a hit that's this successful.
I
Um,
mean, they're not strangers to it. They've certainly had a number of these games over the last 3 decades, but I guess for them, it's a huge bounce back after the Wii U.
yeah, but I guess we just like kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the game in general and kind of like our feelings about it. What were some parts of Breath of the Wild that you thought were really great, and what really stood out for you?
There's so many things I could talk about, but I guess at the top of the list for me has to probably be the world itself. It's so freaking interactive. You can go from deserts to mountains with snow-peaked mountains to volcanoes, and every single one of these different locations completely affects how you play the game. And there's just choices intermingled with all these like environments. For instance, you take the desert, like you go in the desert and you are basically killed from the sun. It's too hot. So you have the choice to either get the Gerudo armor, I believe, or Gerudo attire of some sort, which you can totally do. You can dish out the cash for it, or if you really want, you can choose to get an elixir to help you survive. And the world is huge. It has temples or shrines, sorry, shrines everywhere, but they're still challenging to find. The world is just it's probably the best open world ever created, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The open world was really designed very expertly with a lot of fine details in mind. I feel like we've talked about this in the past, and I feel like there's aspects of the open world that we haven't seen in other video games, and maybe a huge part of it is that as you're playing the game, it feels like every part of what you're doing has a purpose, and it's not like there's a lot of tasks that you're doing throughout the game that are sort of meaningless. And I think there's been a series of open world games that sort of have these side quests where you feel like you're not really like accomplishing a lot while you're moving along. It's just like this side thing that you have to do. But Breath of the Wild really feels like as you play the game, you're really doing a lot to accomplish your final goal throughout the game.
Yeah, I think a large part of that is the fact that everything outside of the Great Plateau and Hyrule Castle quite literally is optional. You don't need to do anything you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So all the side quests that related to cooking, I kind of skipped over because I just wasn't that interested in cooking the best recipes in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I focused more on the shrines and getting more rupees and the quest that personally just piqued my interest. So everything's optional. And yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many other open worlds, like I'm so damn sick of like fishing. Like how excited are you to fish in a video game?
Yeah. Not really.
And like hidden skill trees, quests that just basically have you fighting endless hordes of monsters for little results. And I love a lot of other open world games. I don't want to get too down on the genre. I think it's overcrowded. There's too many of them. They're starting to blend together. But there are some truly marvelous open world games outside of Breath of the Wild. But I think Breath of the Wild fixes so many critical issues that are causing gamers to get bored of the genre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I definitely agree. So outside of the open world, what were other aspects of the game that you really thought stood out a lot?
The shrines, I think, for me were huge. That we're all used to the traditional temple system, you know. All right, go to the temple, get an item upgrade, maybe find a few heart pieces, go to the next temple. But the fact that the world was littered with 120 shrines, and each one of these shrines was a mini puzzle in itself, it was great. I mean, some of the shrines were really hard to find, such as, you know, I think we talked about this one before, but one that we both seem to like, the island where you lose all your equipment.
Oh yeah, it's like starting the whole game again. Like you're starting from scratch.
Yeah, it's just so cool, and it's really hard to get there. You have to do it really late in the game because you need to have like a certain amount of stamina, otherwise you'll never make it over there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, I was just wowed. I was like, wow, this is great. You know, like I have no equipment. I'm back to square one. I'm used to just I was pretty strong at that point, and it was just amazing to like go back to the experience of feeling what it was like to be in the beginning of the game again, even if it was just very temporary.
Yeah, it is it's like a compartmentalized version of the entire game to some extent.
And that's just one example. I could go through literally probably 20 other examples very similar to how special the shrines were and how unique either finding them was or the actual process of trying to problem solve the shrine. And just, I mean, I think we talked about this as well. I just love how the shrines are not just linear problem solving. There's so many ways you can go about solving shrines. And there's so many shrines where there's multiple ways to solve a puzzle.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like the physics of the game they kind of like spoil me in a way, because like after you play the physics of a game like Breath of the Wild, if you go and play another game, like sometimes I feel like you feel almost like too constrained by like what you can do.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's like you realize that most games are designed with only one way of, you know, accomplishing tasks in mind, and Breath of the Wild seems to embrace multiple tasks or multiple ways of accomplishing many of the game's tasks throughout the entire experience.
Yeah, and there's one puzzle you told me about recently. It was a puzzle where you had to use your Joy-Cons or the Switch itself as a motion pad to try to get a little ball through a maze.
Yeah.
And I had done it. I was trying to use my pad to fling the ball off of it onto the actual pad where the, I guess you'd say, what is that? Where the ball rolls into the hole, the destination.
at the end point.
I was trying to flick the ball to the end point, and it kind of worked, but it took me a number of tries. But then you had totally introduced a new way to do it that someone else had done that I wouldn't have never even thought of.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, you just basically completely rotate the little surface on the backside where it's like flat, and then the ball will just like roll over it, and you can completely bypass the actual maze portion of it and just kind of like bounce it along the back of the little platform that you rotate around with the Joy-Con, and it's just like it kind of subverts the maze, and it seems like you're not even supposed to be allowed to do it, but you obviously are, and you can easily beat it that way.
Yeah, and there's so many cases in the game where there's so many instances that are similar to that, or at least offer multiple solutions to a puzzle. And that has to be, I mean, I don't know how you can talk about this game and not consider this aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. Oh, and just to backtrack for 1 second, I just looked it up, and there is an HD remake for the Wii U of Twilight Princess, so you are correct.
Okay, whew, I'm safe.
You are correct. Yeah, I don't know why I.
Well, neither one of us ever owned a Wii U. I didn't. It's the first Nintendo console I never owned, so I don't want to speak too much about stuff on the Wii U. But I did read the article a couple weeks ago saying that Twilight Princess did have an HD remake, which I had never heard of until that article.
Okay. Yeah.
And I also want to talk about one thing you said, because this really goes back to the point you were saying about playing other games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave Zelda here for a second, but you were talking about Mario Odyssey, a game that offers a very similar style of gameplay, and that it's very open and there's multiple ways to solve problems, and you kind of play the game however you feel like playing it. And you were talking about playing Mario Odyssey and jumping to Yooka-Laylee after, and feeling some disappointment.
Oh yeah. Definitely. I mean, the two are just on completely different levels. I absolutely love, the platform genre, and one of my favorite games of all time is Banjo-Kazooie, which is just a classic of the genre. But then, and of course, the creators of Banjo-Kazooie left Rare and came together later to make Yooka-Laylee, and it was very hyped and had a lot of hope, but unfortunately, the mechanics and just like the general play, the place of the game, the play style of the game is just not up to anywhere near the polish of a game like Mario Odyssey, unfortunately. And it was just very, very noticeable, actually.
Yeah, that game had a lot of problems.
Yeah, a lot of problems. I think they really, honestly, just tried to design it for too many platforms at once. Like it came out for PS4. Xbox One, PC, and now Switch, and it's just like a small development team, and I just feel like they stretch themselves too thin,
Yeah, I did hear the Switch localization was better, and that game had so much hype that I think they really thought they had made a great game, and the hype, everyone wanted to play it. There aren't many 3D platformers anymore.
Yeah.
But getting back on track, I guess.
Yeah.
What were some of the things you thought were just like out of this world with Breath of the Wild, really stood out to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we hit a lot of this stuff. I mean, we didn't mention the breakable weapons, and I think a lot of people played that game kind of disappointed by the breakable weapons because they get like really cool items, and they really enjoy using those items. Like they really enjoy the game just has like a lot of cool swords and cool shields and stuff. But I feel like what the breakable items really give you is a sense of scarcity, and it really like fits the theme of the whole game of just kind of like being more about survival than anything else. And the fact that you have to like think about if it's worth it to like potentially break an item on certain enemies that you don't necessarily need to kill. You could do it, but maybe you want to just like save your items for another situation. Like maybe you don't want to do it. Like it kind of like adds an element of scarcity that I think is like kind of like missing and really interesting in the open world genre. So I really, really like that actually. What did you think about that?
I had, I guess, a When you said that, I kind of chuckled a little bit because when I first played the game, I found it really frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
I still love the game, but I was just getting my butt kicked by all the enemies I was encountering, and I had like 30 years of Zelda experience, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go through these enemies, I'm gonna plow through them, and I had more game overs in the first maybe 10 hours of this game than I probably had in an entire game of most of the old Zeldas, outside of a few.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't die very often in most of the old Zeldas. There's a few exceptions, but yeah, then I really came to love it because as I got stronger and stronger through the game, it felt like there was a natural progression. And yeah, just like you said, that element of scarcity just added to the Zelda. Nintendo clearly wants you to feel like you have to survive this world. This isn't your world to dominate. And it's just kind of like how everything is crumbled around you. You go in the game, you're like, oh, I'm an experienced Zelda player. There's the Temple of Time. There's Hyrule Castle. I got this.
Yeah.
And the game immediately humbles you. And it's great because I think that's just, it's one of the many ways this game introduces Zelda to an entirely new generation who have maybe never played the old Zeldas, but keeps it fresh. And I loved it by the end of the game. But I will admit that I had a few frustrations, and I was just too afraid to use a few of my items. Like I really didn't. I was terrified of the Hylian shield breaking.
Yeah, like who wants the Hylian shield to break?
Right? The legendary shields. No, but yeah, no. It was definitely one of those things I had mixed feelings about. But I agree. It's great. It absolutely gives the game it gives it credibility. It makes the player really have to question: should I enter combat? Should I not enter combat? Do I want to waste the resources for what I might gain from this battle?
Yeah, it introduces an element of having to balance things and to think about the costs of engaging when maybe you can just avoid it. But so in general, though, what were aspects of the game that you thought were a little bit lacking, if any at all?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot to say here that hasn't already been said, but obviously the plot would be a big point that was lacking. I'm not sure that you could design this game the way they designed it and have an integral plot that would be acceptable to most players. But the fact that most of the plot was happening 100 years in the past, and that you could just skip all of it if you wanted to, outside of a few cutscenes, definitely didn't please me as much as I was kind of hoping to get. But at the same time, I've never really played Zelda for the plot. I can't think of a single Zelda game that I've really played to enjoy the plot more than any other element of the game.
Yeah. I mean, previous Zelda games have definitely been they've had a little bit more in-depth plot than this. I don't know. Like my favorite Zelda game is probably Majora's Mask. And I think that game's plot was really, really integral. But it was kind of like an outlier game in a lot of ways, especially the plot-wise.
I would also argue that game, kind of like Breath of the Wild, if you want to really experience the plot, you have to do all the side quests, and you can miss a lot of the plot if you don't pursue the masks.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of that game is based on the masks that you kind of have to get. And I guess you could beat that game without really experiencing a lot of it. It's kind of interesting.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do enjoy the Zelda plot lines, Like Ocarina of Time felt like kind of a fairy tale. Majora's Mask was much darker. It had these really kind of intriguing characters. Twilight Princess had the whole end of the world theme that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
I do find the world of Zelda charming, and I think that Zelda Breath of the Wild kept one thing that I've really always appreciated about Zelda, that no matter how dark that game gets, you have all these quirky side characters, and the dialogue is kind of fun and witty and quirky, and that exists in Breath of the Wild. You have this world that's ripped apart, it's dominated by Ganon, yet all your interactions with most of the townsfolk and the random people you'll encounter, the NPCs, is pretty lighthearted and quirky.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that they kept that side of Zelda in this game, even though it isn't somewhat like of a post-apocalyptic dark world. It's still pretty lighthearted in a lot of ways. I really like the music of the game. I thought the score was just
Wait, what music?
You know, like the light, oh, the what music? Yeah, I mean, just the light, like kind of subtle tunes that you get throughout the game. The actually my favorite part of the music is Kakariko Village, but you know, I thought the music was suited the game really well. I mean, you're right; it is like more,
It's
uh,
minimalistic.
yeah, it's minimalistic, but it's good and it's good in that way. I think it kind of suits it really well.
Yeah, that's interesting. The music is one of those things in Breath of the Wild that's it's one of the few really disputed elements of the game. Some people really defend it and say this is a great soundtrack. It hits all the emotional notes. When you hear the music, it's great. It lets you, when you don't hear the music, you're out exploring in nature. It kind of gives you more of an immersed feeling rather than hearing this like heroic theme as you're walking across these random plains. And then there's other people who say like, where is the music? You know, it doesn't exist. It's just it's too minimalistic. I want to hear more of that like epic Zelda music, that symphonic epic Zelda music we've become really accustomed to. And
Yeah,
I kind of sit on the fence on this one because I love the Breath of the Wild soundtrack. I really love it. That like those really dissonant piano tones I heard, and like when the music kicks in, it really hits hard. Like the music is really good, and it adds such an emotional depth to the game. And I kind of like that when you're exploring a random mountain or you're in the middle of nowhere. There is no music. You just hear the wind or these like chirping birds or something. It does kind of make you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere.
yeah, and I think that's kind of what it's going for. Like it tries to mimic nature and like the way that it would feel to kind of be in a forest, like a that has just kind of like this ambient kind of natural feeling, like the way the wind sounds as it's blowing through the trees or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't miss having more music in the Zelda, but it didn't bother me. To me, it wasn't really something I would take a mark off the game for.
Hmm.
It was a choice by the designers that, or sorry, the developers. It's a developer's choice that I'm okay with, and I think it's interesting because they did that for a reason. It wasn't something they just said, well, we don't want to make any more music. It was a very deliberated. It was a very deliberate choice,
Hmm.
and I respect that choice because it matches the tone of the game and it fits, and there are reasons. So I am pretty. I can't say that it bothered me.
Yeah, yeah. Like I don't know. I guess different opinions can exist about that, but
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
yeah. So I guess one thing we could sort of talk about is the concept of Zelda-ness. Like, do you think that this game, like, how much do you think that this game is differentiated from other Zelda games? Like how much of a step change do you think that this is?
You mean in like relation to the older Zelda games?
Yeah.
It's a huge difference. I mean, it's been talked about before, but this game is probably the closest to the original Zelda than any other Zelda has ever been.
Yeah. And what do you mean? What do you mean by that exactly?
The original Zelda kind of just tosses you into a world. You literally start the game. There's no objective. There's nowhere you have to go. Everyone will get the sword in the beginning, but after that, the world is yours to explore. It's huge. It's a little bit terrifying because you don't really know what you're going to encounter. It's exciting, and Breath of the Wild is the first game that's captured that open world, just objectiveless, like do what you want.
Hmm.
Every Zelda game has had a sense of adventure and a sense of exploration. It's a huge part of the series, but only Breath of the Wild and the original game have taken it to the extreme that they just put you in a world and say, "Hey, go where you want. You're going to discover your own adventure." And I might argue that Breath of the Wild actually does that more than the original because in the original you have to beat the dungeons. You can't just get to Ganon without beating the dungeons. So you have to find those dungeons. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, as soon as you beat the Great Plateau, there's Hyrule Castle. If you want to go challenge Ganon, hey, go for it with 3 hearts. But most people are going to opt to explore the world and try to. What were those for? The Divine Beast. They're
Yeah.
going to try to get the Divine Beast. They're going to try to get probably try to get as many shrines as they can. And I think in that way, it's the closest to the original game than any Zelda between them.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It like the game introduces new elements, but it also uh, is kind of harkens back to like what made Zelda awesome to begin with. I think.
Right, yeah.
Um,
So as much changes, some of it stays the same.
yeah, and what and do you think like how much of this game do you think will be in the next Zelda game? And do you think that they'll keep the open world style of it, or will it go back to the other kind of style?
Yeah, that's a tough question. This is all speculation, and actually, Nintendo's already started making that second Zelda game. I think I read last year that Nintendo had said they want to keep the open world setting,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if they're going to keep the shrine system. I don't know if they're going to keep the game, the plot as distant as they did in Breath of the Wild. I can only speculate and assume that they're going to bring the game in just a little bit, as in there's going to be more that you have to do. There's going to be more integral plots, and if anything, you're going to see kind of Breath of the Wild meets maybe something like Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time. I really don't know. It's a good question. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's going to be like a very similar kind of engine as this game, like if not the exact same engine. Like, and it'll probably be a situation similar to like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, where it's basically like visually very very similar. But I do expect that this next game might have a little bit of a smaller world. Like it may have open world elements, but I don't think it'll be quite as expansive. Like maybe it won't have shrines, maybe it will have shrines. I don't know, but I kind of expect more plot. Like I think that that's going to be a huge part of it. I'm hoping personally that the plot is kind of like unique and maybe like not. I mean, like kind of not exactly like Majora's Mask, but like in that kind of sense, like kind of like unique style like that. Um, I would really, really like to see that. And yeah, maybe like more plot centric because this game is just like obviously just more about the world and also just like the mechanics of the game.
Yeah, for sure. It just kind of throws you out there. It's interesting you mentioned the art design. I don't think anyone could really ever predict where Nintendo will take Zelda with art design.
Oh, that's very true.
I mean, you saw Majora's Mask looked like Ocarina of Time. It was a little bit dark. Then you get to the cell shading of Wind Waker, which made everyone upset. Then you get to the very realistic looking Twilight Princess, and they brought it back to like the animation and kind of like cell shading with Skyward Sword.
Mm-hmm.
That could be anyone's guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think they'll stick to the style of Breath of the Wild in the next one, but I don't know what did you think about the art style of this game? Like I found it to be a little bit too anime-ish at times.
Anime-ish.
Just especially the cutscenes. And let's just be honest, the freaking voice acting was literally the worst part of this entire game, but
the voice acting, yeah. I mean maybe
no one.
I don't want to say no. Someone out there probably can defend it, but that voice acting was god awful, especially Zelda. Yeah, that was horrendous.
The British accent.
Link, please help me make it to the castle. I don't even want to try to do it beyond that. But yeah, so many people were saying how they wanted voice acting in games like Twilight Princess. And I kind of want Zelda to have no voice acting.
Yeah, I'm of that opinion as well. I definitely would prefer no voice acting at all. But I don't know if that's gonna. I don't know if they're gonna keep if they'll ever listen to that. But
because they only had a certain amount of characters voice acted, they only had maybe the 6 or 7 most integral characters.
Yeah,
voice acted, and they were pretty poorly done. I mean, I don't want to say they weren't professional, but they didn't fit the tone of the game whatsoever. And it almost seemed like they had these characters or these voice actors record them without even really like playing the game. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, you're gonna be Link. Oh, that's Link. Like, I know Link. Yeah, just record this stuff. Link didn't even talk.
Link didn't talk, but you're right. Like the voice actors very like disjointed from the game experience in general.
Yeah, it kind of took me out of it in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then as I like saw how little plot there was, I enjoyed what the cutscenes offered. I enjoyed the actual story. So I kind of could accept the bad voice acting. But I hope Nintendo does not bring that to the next Zelda game.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it was a vocal criticism, but I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll have to find out. But
I read about it, and some people were saying it was really good. They really liked the voice acting. It's not quite as hated as you might think it is. Like there are a lot of people that share our opinion that it's garbage, but there were people that were defending it, saying, "Yeah, it's really cool. I wanted this I wanted this to start in Zelda Twilight Princess." So who knows? I mean, Nintendo is. I mean, I can't think. None of their series are really voice acted up to this point. There's no really voice acting in Mario. Star Fox had some voice acting, even on the N64.
Yeah, but that voice acting is like
Do a barrel roll.
Do a barrel.
No. But none of their main series. I mean, has Metroid ever had voice acting? You're way more familiar with that series.
Metroid Prime? I don't think so. I don't think there's any voice in Metroid Prime.
I kind of like that Nintendo hasn't gotten into that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think they should bother with it.
Unless you're going to really pay actors big time. A series like, I think there are some series, especially like series like Uncharted, or we both played The Last of Us, that really felt like a long, long visual novel or a movie, and you're playing it. The voice acting is really well done. Those actors are clearly very talented. They knew their characters very well.
Mm-hmm.
When the voice acting is that good and it makes the game pop out like it did in a game like The Last of Us, I definitely support voice acting. Like that game would not be the same without it.
Oh yeah, totally. And when it's like a very plot heavy game and it's like you're basically watching a movie as you're playing the game, then sure. But I don't know. I feel like for Nintendo games, especially games that are more like Zelda, where it's like a lot of puzzles and you're experiencing the world, like you don't really need the voice acting at all.
No, especially if you're going to keep the plot in the background as much as Breath of the Wild, what's the point of having bad voice acting? Just keep those kind of weird sounds that the characters say, or do you know what I'm talking about? Like the characters in Zelda make weird noises, but they don't actually use English or Japanese. Or maybe they use a little bit of Japanese, actually.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. But I don't know. But anyway, that's just I feel like in general, it's kind of like a small criticism that we have. It's not like an overwhelmingly huge issue, but
no, I mean the story wasn't even big enough for it to be a huge complaint.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I want to know what we talked about open worlds a little bit earlier.
Oh yeah.
I think we should talk about open worlds and Nintendo, because I think let's talk about Nintendo. What do you think this means for Nintendo as a company? We just saw the Switch come out. It's been lauded by everybody. Everyone loves the Switch. Everyone's jumping on board. And this hasn't really happened to a Nintendo console. So it's probably maybe the N64 that people are this excited about a Nintendo console.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like it's definitely a very exciting time for Nintendo and Nintendo fans in general. I think it means that Nintendo is going to be a lot more confident in being kind of creative in their games. Like, I think that they've recognized that the old direction that they were going to, especially in the Wii U era, which is like widely criticized and sort of thought of as like
kind of unfairly though, because they had some great games on the Wii U.
To be honest, I think you're totally right. But just like kind of like the market saw it as a failure, and like Nintendo really recognized that they had to like alter their course. And I think that they did alter their course, and I think that the new course that they're on is something that we all really like a lot. So I think that like our feelings about this are just going to encourage Nintendo to just keep making like highly creative games, and to just like to not be afraid of just trying new things. And I don't know. I think it's good all around for Nintendo.
I guess we can keep it kind of Zelda centric. Zelda Breath of the Wild was a launch title. You bought a Switch at launch.
Yeah.
And what did that feel like for you, having the Switch at launch with Zelda Breath of the Wild?
It felt expensive. No. Well, I had to import it to South Korea. like South Korea didn't start selling them until pretty much January of 2018. So it took a while. But anyway, I don't know. It was actually really great playing it without a lot of other input. You know, I really just played it like pretty much right at launch. It was definitely a pretty great experience, and I thought that Nintendo just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, I knew you had the Switch, and I kept hearing everyone talk about how great Zelda was. 10 out of 10 on IGN, or everyone being like, "This is the best Zelda game ever." And I was originally very, very skeptical about the Switch and whether or not it would be successful. And I don't regret those accusations because they were pretty well grounded, I think, in the history of Nintendo. But the 6 months I didn't own the Switch, or maybe 8 months ish, I was just like, wow, man, like, oh, Zelda Breath of the Wild sitting there. It just tantalized me the whole time. Like, here's the new Zelda game. I could play it, but I don't have the Switch yet. And oh man, like Toby's sitting there, he's playing through it. He's saying it's amazing. And I didn't get my Switch until December, and I actually had Mario Odyssey before I had Zelda, just because I wanted to, living in Taiwan, I wanted that Western copy of Breath of the Wild. So I opted to get Mario Odyssey. But in my opinion, Breath of the Wild just is a better game than Mario Odyssey. I had such a more immersive, amazing experience with it.
Yeah. I mean, I love all these. I love both Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, but
yeah, I don't want to take anything from Mario Odyssey. It's amazing, but Breath of the Wild for me personally, it grabbed me more.
Yeah. I mean,
I could barely stop playing Breath of the Wild. I played for 3, 4, 5 hours. I can't really tell you the last time I put that much time into a video game in single sessions. It was just like, give me more, please. And as soon as I turned it off, my mind was just stuck in Breath of the Wild. I'd wake up, my mind is in Breath of the Wild. It's been so long. I can't even think of the last time I had that experience with a game. And Mario Odyssey didn't do that to me. It was just really fun and really innovative.
Yeah, like I played the hell out of both of those games, but I do think that Breath of the Wild took me back to, the feelings that you get kind of when, you're very young. Christmas, but like when you're very young and, you first start playing video games. I think a lot of people have these experiences, just like the awe that you feel about like what the systems are capable of doing and kind of like what these developers are working on.
I think it's just that gameplay experience. It's completely new, but it's like being a kid again when you go into Breath of the Wild. Everything you're weak. You're in this whole world, this huge. Everything around you is usable. You're picking mushrooms. You're climbing trees to get apples. You're chopping down trees for wood. You're trying to find fires. Like, it's just the whole world around you. It's alive. And I played that game, and every time I played it, it just felt like I was making progress. I'd find a couple of shrines. I'd collect a bunch of food. I would find a new area. I'd get to a new tower. Everything was progress. And I knew, I was like, oh my God, if I could just play for 30 more minutes, I could do this. If I could play for 2 more hours, I could have a couple more shrines, have a new heart piece. And I just got sucked in.
Yeah. For me, like the expansiveness of the map and just like knowing that you could travel through so many different areas and that there were so many different areas available to travel through really compelled me to just play it more, because I knew there was so much there that I had to still do and that I wanted to do. Like no moment of that game felt like a chore. I felt like every time I picked it up, it was because I wanted to, and it was because it was fun.
Yeah, no, I can't think of a single hour I played that game that felt like a chore. There isn't one.
No.
And Mario Odyssey, I guess, to the contrary, I felt like sometimes, like after you beat the main quest, where I'm at now, I might have 300, 350 power moons.
Yeah.
This feels a little bit tedious when I play for 30 minutes and I collect 4 more power moons. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't really do much to getting me to like the 500 I need. No. Like, I've explored these worlds to death. And to be fair, I'm kind of in the post game, but like, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't grab me as much.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild just.
Yeah. So I do feel like Breath of the Wild is not as geared towards beginner gamers as Mario Odyssey is. And the problem with Mario Odyssey, and I really love that game, but it really tries to appeal to the very, very, very beginner gamers as well as very like advanced and experienced gamers like simultaneously, and it's kind of not consistent in some ways. Like I feel like it has all of these power moons that you don't need to get, or they're just like too easy to get. Like, it could be a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I didn't feel very challenged by Mario Odyssey, whereas Breath of the Wild felt just right. Like every time I got a game over in Breath of the Wild, I kind of knew what I did wrong. I was just, oh man, yeah, I should not have gone and just charged at those like random enemies sitting in that skull. You know, and you knew it, and like if you got a game over, it's really cool because you're like, oh, maybe I can do this strategy next. Maybe I can shoot some fire arrows, blow up the barrels, freeze a couple of the enemies, take out the strong ones with my sword. There's a lot of strategy,
Totally,
and you needed to have it.
Yeah, you needed to have it, and there's a lot of strategy available. You know, like you don't have to beat it in one way. Like you could play it with a different mindset just through the decisions that you kind of make throughout the game. Like you can play the whole game the first time, you know, going clockwise through the map, and then you can play it again going counterclockwise through the map. Like you don't have to follow the same path. You can make different decisions.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit, I think. I mean, what route around the map did you take?
I'm pretty sure I actually did take like kind of, so like starting out at the Great Plateau, I think I just went I went east and then kind of just swung around counterclockwise until I beat all of the divine.
So you did the Gorons, so you did the Zoras first.
Yeah.
Then the Gorons. And then what were those birds called?
I don't know.
The Rito? Was it Rito?
The Rito.
You did the Ritos and then the Gerudos.
Yeah. And how did you beat it?
I did the Zoras first, like you did.
Yeah.
And then actually, maybe I'm just an idiot. I was trying to get to the Goron area, and there's thunderstorms, like continuous thunderstorms.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea how to dodge the lightning. I didn't even understand anything about it. So so I kept dying. I died like 10 times. And I was just like, you know what? Maybe I'm not supposed to go here. And so I just went towards the desert. So I did the Gerudos actually second. And then I went up and I did the Ritos. And then the Gorons last. Oh. And I'm so dumb, man. Like it wasn't until like 40 hours in the game that I realized, I'm like, oh, the lightning's attracted to the metal I'm wearing. So I quit it. And I'm not kidding. For the first 40 hours I played that game, I was terrified of the thunderstorms because they killed me so many times.
Yeah.
I literally didn't unequip anything. I had no idea how to get past it. I didn't know what the problem was. I was like, yeah, this stuff's invincible. There's no elixir that can get you through this.
Yeah. That was pretty funny, actually.
So I think the last thing we can end it here. What do you think? I mean, compared to other open world games, what do you think this game will do for the future of it, the genre?
I don't know. I think that kind of remains to be seen. Like, I don't know if the industry in general will really adopt a lot of this stuff that Breath of the Wild had, or if it'll just sort of continue on its course. I would love to see more games like this. Like, I really feel strongly that Breath of the Wild just took its game design very, very seriously and made a game that had many different facets that complemented each other. I would like to see something like that. Like I'd like to see breakable items that kind of lend it to a sense of like scarcity and having to find your way and navigate through this world. I would like to see more games like this.
But to be fair, sorry to interrupt you, but I think for me, I really like it when games will let your items break, but then you can repair them.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that Nintendo could adopt in the next Zelda game.
Yeah,
I do like that maybe you can spend some money or you get some resources and you can repair these items you get really attached to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it probably would have been okay if later on in the game they had some way of being able to repair.
Because some games have done that in the past. They've given you a repair system.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Nintendo, like, I think they very intentionally didn't include that.
I do too, yeah. And I don't have a problem with it, like I said, but I think like when you're talking about other games, they don't have to necessarily copy that exact style. They could do something similar, like limited items not being unbreakable is the standard, but you don't have to necessarily have them be destroyed either. You could make a way to keep them, but they're unusable for a certain time, or you have to repair them or something.
Like some kind of cooldown or repair mechanic.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I think this pretty much wraps up our first podcast.
Yeah, on a final note, I think we both love Breath of the Wild. It's an awesome game, and I think personally, when you look back at Breath of the Wild 1 year from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from 30 years from now, this will be one of the games of the decade, if not all time, that will be remembered. It will be a benchmark.
Yep, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. So if you haven't played Breath of the Wild, if you don't own a Switch, jump on that because it's an amazing console. There's a lot of great games, and Breath of the Wild is so much fun. I mean, you could put 40 hours in this game. You can put 200 hours in this game. It's whatever you want the game to be. So definitely go pick that up if you haven't. And yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Do you want to do the outro?
Intro.
Outro, I think the outro, all I have to do is really say
it's so hard.
You want me to do it?
Yeah, just do it. We'll just edit it and then you can add it.
Okay. All right. We both love Breath of the Wild. We hope you play it. And we really hope that if you're listening to us, we really appreciate you listening. And we would love to hear your opinions about Breath of the Wild, whether it's about what we said tonight, whether you agree, disagree, your own thoughts, ask us questions. We would love to talk to you. And come join us again in 2 weeks for our next topic.
All right.